Hello, my name is Morgan, sometimes known as Greyvoice, and I was asked to listen and review the album Re-Laxman Volume 1 by Sandeep Chowta and Tony Das. So let's just jump right into it. This first song is a good, dip in the water, I think, a good little toe dip. It's subtle and it's classy. I think the whole thing that I would take away from this album is that it's very classy, It's very easy and smooth, and I mean, it's called Re-Laxman Volume 1, so makes me relax. That guitar tone is phenomenal through this whole album, I think. Tony Das is the guitarist, and Sandeep Chowta is a composer, and he's done movies. This guitar tone is very classy. I really enjoy it, and it's it's so good, yeah. The album is just full of very subtle mastery of the instrument, I think. It's not too flashy, it's not too showy, but when he wants to, he'll just do those those really good jazzy runs, I think. I think the way this album is mastered is very good. There's nothing about it that's harsh to the ear. You almost get lost in it. It's got a level of ambience, and I, in particular, really enjoy ambience. There's vocals are used very sparingly, like in here. Let me turn this down a little bit. So I like how the vocals in this album are kind of used as an instrument in of themselves. It's not front and center necessarily. It's used to highlight certain moments. I find that a lot of these melodies are very hummable. They're very, they get stuck in your head. You could imagine vocal lines going over that, your brain kind of fills in the blanks. And that's, I think that makes a very powerful statement in an album where your own brain kind of fills in the blanks of what you're listening to, So this album has a bunch of, it has jam tracks to it, where it's the same track but without any guitar in it. And so I've actually played along to this one frequently. It's got very good chord changes, I find, They're jazzy and misleading, You think they're going to go one place and then they resolve another, and, Jazz! My background is not in jazz. My background is in musical theater and ambient music and metal. There's a lot of intersecting jazz in any of those genres, I think, so I really dig it. I feel Tony Das, the guitar player, he's front and center for a lot of this album since he has a very good leading instrument. But Sandeep Chowta, his composer and producer elements are super prevalent over all of this, and it really creates a very good immersive experience, I think. I also have to give it up, since the keyboards are kind of in the background, I always am very I'm always very aware of the background elements, such as those keyboards just playing those chords, And that sounds like a very kind of classic electric piano with chorus on it or something. I'm not sure, I didn't write the album. If I went into a club and heard this, I would stay. I'd stay for this band. Re-Laxman. Sandeep, Tony, if you guys were playing live, I would stay. I'd buy a drink and stay. This one's called Cruise Control. I really, really effing like this one. I love these chords. They're they're brooding, but they're hopeful. And Tony's guitar in this is particularly good. I'm all about it. That's a really good lead line. That's phenomenal. I want to try and look up the gear that both of them use to make this album. It's, I'm really into that. There's this pad that's happening that kind of swells, I love that stuff. It's so it's very soaring. It makes you feel like you're floating. I'm wondering if this is, if they have a vocalist actually recording here, or maybe it's like samples or something, you know? Like, I like using samples personally. Also, something else to be said, these bass lines are like, they're not garish bass lines, they're just like... Is that cool? I like the technique of using more busy percussion elements to kind of like raise the stakes in the music, you know? Oh man, that's such a good synth. I love that. It's boopy, and I like boopy synths. Oh, I like this one a lot too. I find that a lot of great songs are hidden in the middle of the album, you know? Of any album, I should say. More very good synths here. I'm a huge sucker for a good pad. I find this music would be great for like a long car ride, you know? Especially at night. There's something kind of romantic about being on like a long car ride and, you know, in the middle of the night on the highway and listening to this kind of music. It really gets you thinking, you know? Ruminate about your problems. I know there's plenty of times where I've thought about deep life stuff with music kind of similar to this playing while I was driving. I think this track, Cineimagination, is definitely the most ambient of all of them. It's very atmospheric. It's like there's a cloud kind of all around you. It feels like scaling a particularly misty mountain with a kind of a sci-fi backdrop. Boy, that's very cool. That da 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 da. I wonder if he was playing that or using some kind of a delay to get that effect. Ooh. Dual guitars, nice touch. Love it. This is called Chillin' in Blue. Ooh. A new element, hitherto not heard before. I will say this is a statement that's not specific to this particular song, but my very first thought when I was listening to this, and I'm a huge fan of soundtracks, is that this sounds like a Persona soundtrack. I don't know if anyone out there has played those games, the Persona games, or know the composer Shoji Meguro, but it reminds me of like Persona 4 in particular. They have the same kind of like, you know, very smooth kind of jazz that's laced with like, you know, synthesizer elements. Sounds like brass to me. Gosh, I don't know what instrument that is. My brain fell out for a second. This is definitely not like a Shredder's album, but as a person who, you know, also plays, I find shredding is sometimes overrated. I find that what they're doing, creating like long-lasting, you know, good melodies, and then occasionally shredding around it, is a much better way to go about it, I think. So I commend Tony for that, for sure. I'm sitting here looking like a fool, because every now and then that instrument, that it sounds like a brass instrument, it sounds like either a clarinet or even maybe an alto sax is playing, and I really love it. It doesn't last very long, it's just a splash of it. But yeah, I don't know what instrument that is, I'm sorry. The reverb on that electric piano also kind of reminds me of Porcupine Tree a little bit, because I know that they use the electric piano in a very broody way. It also reminds me of Akira Yamaoka, another Japanese composer who did the Silent Hill series. Obviously his stuff is more scary and creepy than this. This is a very particularly hopeful number, and I love it. It's called 11th Hour. It's perfectly named, I think. And this is what I would consider to be their closing number, you know? This whole album, it just like, if I could give it one bad mark, it would be that it's very brief. It's, a lot of these tracks are only 3.5 minutes long. Some of them are only like barely 3 minutes long, and they're very good. But at the same time, I think there's something powerful about that as well, you know? They don't overstay their welcome. They don't get too noodly, you know? There's a lot of bands and there's a lot of players out there who don't know when to stop playing guitar and to let the music kind of take over. That's another thing I would say about this whole album is that I know that the guitar takes a lot of the lead, but it feels like no single element kind of overbears the other. It feels very equally distributed amongst itself. And dare I say it, it's relaxing. There's also something kind of timeless about this album. If you would have told me this album came out in like the late 70s, early 80s, or even the 90s, or even like the 2000s, or even now, I would believe you, you know? And that's not to say that, oh, it sounds dated. No, I think that there's something truly timeless about music like this. So much of the fundamentals of it feel almost unchanged to me because it's been kind of perfect from its offset. But if you're a person who actually studies jazz and you think that I sound like I'm talking out of my ass, then, you know, feel free to tell me. The way I take in music is I learned feel first because I was a, you know, performer and actor, and then in college that's when I learned theory. So I kind of come at it from that angle as opposed to theory first and then feel second. But as a person who kind of is more attached to his guts in terms of how he listens to music, I really like this. Wow. I love that ending. I like any kind of album or music listening experiences that has that kind of like, it almost feels unresolved, you know? And I feel like when something is unresolved musically, it gives you kind of more of a desire to listen to more from the artist, or in this case, the two artists. Anyhow, I would consider 11th Hour to be the last track on that album. There are two more tracks that I can see here, but they are 3/4 Shut the Door, the first track, and Counting Sheep, the second track. They're just the jam tracks, so you can just put them on and you can just jam to them, and I have done it. I would even say, you know, for anyone who wants to practice their jazz noodling, those two tracks are perfect for that, you know? They're not like super crazy and super intense. It's not like, you know, jumping time signatures and doing all these different like, you know, chord changes. But they're like, it's enough for you to kind of wrap your brain around how you should act and react when you're kind of doing soloing over jazz stuff. Anyway, this has been Morgan. Thank you guys. And thank you, Sandeep and Tony, for making a really relaxing album. Relax, man.